My name is Ray Hill. I think I'm the only co-founder of KPFT in the room. And I was going to say, I think I'm the only former general manager of the radio station in the room, and then I thought about how things actually work. And Cliff has had to be general manager when the office doors are closed and the station is solely in his hands. Judon has been in the same situation. Everybody that programs on KPFT have had to at least pretend to be manager at some time or another, because it's an open door operation and people who are there, if there ain't nobody else there to claim, are in charge. It's kind of like real life. I want to thank the CWA for giving us this opportunity. Both of my parents were labor goons. My mother organized or tried to organize nurses for the Teamsters. That didn't work, but she was very proud of that work. And my father had a little better luck organizing shipyard workers for the AFL-CIO, and he hated it because his job was maintenance, and he had to go to work across the picket line to keep the acetylene plant from blowing up. So I come by this very honestly. I'm the one queer ex-convict you'll meet in your life who grew up to be who his mother intended him to be. I joined KPFT in January of 1968 when a young man walked up to me stepping off of a television set and said, "We're trying to build a radio station where people can say controversial things without seeking the opinion of the opposite position on those things." And that had immediately appealed to me because I had been on Ray Miller's show to talk about gay, lesbian, and transgendered people, and I was not warmly received. I had to win 3 debates, but I did that in 15 minutes, took over the show, and finally gave it back to Ray so we could take the station off the air. I had previously studied the media under Marshall McLuhan. I had attended a couple of his seminaries, one in Toronto and one in the Bahamas. The Bahamas was a better seminar to go to. And I learned about how media works, so I understand radio pretty well. And so when Larry asked my help in that, we had a secret, there were 4 of us. It was Larry Lee, who was a former editor of the Daily Texan, University of Texas. He was the news guy. And then there was Don Gardner, who was a music guy. And Don is still alive and still in music, in the Austin music scene. But he understood the depth and the importance of music in any open community radio. And there was me and Deborah Denberg, and I were the other 2 of the 4. Deborah was then, I think she was like 17 years old and a junior at University of Houston. And so we had 3 spheres of influence to organize KPFT. One of them was the Cougar Den, which is preceding to the Student Union building at the University of Houston. Another was Wheeler Avenue Baptist Church, which is not too far, and under the gentle tutelage of Reverend Bill over there, we were able to have our meetings there, and at First Unitarian Church, the First Church there on Pennant Street. So Bill Lawson and whoever was pastor of First Church at the time and University of Houston Rabble, which at the time kind of include, Ted, weren't you student activities head out there? You would come later. But Ted would know that, but in those days, we talked to people about an idea that they didn't have any concept of. And that idea was that there would be a radio station which produced programming without commercial sponsors of any kind. And that would give us the freedom to do the radio that needed to be done rather than radio that satisfied the needs of the commercial sponsors. Now, I know you can extremely look at that and make a demon out of commercial radio. I use commercial radio just like I use KPFT. Well, nobody exploits KPFT like I do. But the fact of the matter is, it was created for me to do that. Because who do I represent? For 5 years, oh, by the way, we went on the air in 1970 in March, and I went to prison in November of 1970. I was sentenced to 160 years, so I'm a lot older than I look. And I got to prison, and I had to resign the board at KPFT in a visit from Larry Lee to the visiting room at the Ramsey unit. So that's actually because I couldn't attend the meetings and do the voting, so I couldn't hold the responsibility. So I have been a board member of KPFT, the first board. But I resigned, and I did my time. I got out in 4 years, 4 months, and 17 days, and 3 days later, I walked back into KPFT and started doing the gay show. Well, in 1975, talking about gay, lesbian, and transgendered issues was not a mainstream idea. And I did it the tough way. I invited hater calls so that I could slay them on the air. And you can't lose a debate if you've got the buttons and the switches. So let them rage. Listen to everything they've got to say, shut them down, and then I get to do the wrap-up, and guess who won? They don't do gay programming like that anymore. First place, they couldn't get the good calls that I got. But we had that, and then I did that for about 5 years, and then one day, somebody said, "Have you seen Judy?" Judy was our general manager. And I said, "No, I haven't seen her in a while." She had been missing for about 2 weeks. And the station was full of volunteers, and so we cast lots, and I lost. And so I was to be the new general manager. So we notified Aaron Fox, Plotkin, and Kahn, our lawyers in Washington, D.C., they need to inform the FCC that we have a new manager. And they said, no, you can't do that. And I said, why not? And they said, well, according to the FCC code, it says right here in this section that managers of of licensed broadcast facilities must be people of good moral character. And I said, what does that mean? Well, he said, certainly no perverts and no convicts. And I said, well, just inform them that we're not in compliance with that rule. The rule changed. So I became the first queer ex-convict to manage a broadcast facility in the United States. So we had better luck with the Ray Hill management case than we had with the Carlin case, which had preceded it by some years. We won that one and we lost the Carlin case. But we're still the free speech people. I'm sitting in my office listening to the poetry show. And there's this guy on the poetry show which is reading a poem which I find offensive. But that just increased my attention on what is being said. So I sent word to ask that guest to come by my office. That was OBDK. And the first 3 things out of his mouth in my office were offensive. I said, I need this man as a programmer. I need to give him his own show and get out of the way and let him do the radio that he can do, because he increased my attention and he would increase the attention of others. I needed audience. He's been on KPFT in one capacity or another since. Cliff Smith walked in my office and was damned and determined I was going to put somebody he knew that had just been kicked off of KTSU onto KPFT. Well, from my diplomatic point, that puts me in a protocol issue. I've got a fellow non-commercial radio station over here who's banished a programmer that they had for, I don't know, understand the depth of that. But I'm sitting there listening to Cliff Smith, and he's talking to me about putting somebody else on the radio. And I said, Cliff, I'm not going to do that because I can't do that protocol, but I can put you on the air and you can have him as a guest. Well, Cliff didn't think that was a very good idea. But when he got his radio show, the first several things he said on that radio show, I found challenging offensive and thought-provoking. Cliff's still at KPFT. Is your program still called Community Dialogue, Cliff? You can still go over and hear Cliff on KPFT, and he's still offensive. He still makes you think. He still challenges you. And that's the nucleus of the matter. For 32 years, I not only hosted the prison show, but I produced it as well. I was the warden. Everything that happened on the prison show was my decision to make it happen. I did a show last night. We did a homecoming on the prison show, and I went in and was host and producer of that show. First thing I did is I put 4 other people in the room with me, all the people that had hosted the prison show. Only missing was Catherine Griffin. She didn't make it, but the rest of the hosts were there. Well, Catherine didn't make it, and Anthony Graves didn't make it, but the other hosts were there. And we're all convicts in one form or another. So we had this convict radio show host discussion. And then we brought in the Hernandez girls. Now let me tell you how powerful radio can be. Soon after I got on the radio, the Hernandez family was calling in to talk to Sylvia's son, Tokyo Hernandez. And he had 3 daughters. The eldest of the daughters is Brianna. When Brianna first came to the show, I had a reporter from Mother Jones magazine in there taking pictures and writing an article about the show. And here's this really, really tiny, frail Hispanic child holding notes in front of her, in front of a great big microphone. The microphone's almost as big as she is. And she's leaning there and very heartfeltly singing "You Are My Sunshine" to the father that will not get out until she is in her 50s. And Brianna did that for several years. Every Friday, come to the station, sing "You Are My Sunshine" to my father. And whenever Brianna got kind of in her teens, where that was maybe not as thing a teenager's interested in, her younger sister, Stacy, took over. And there was little Stacy singing "You Are My Sunshine" to her father. And she grew into her advancement, and that was not so important to her. And then the baby, the youngest sister, took over. Well, those 3 women were in the studio with me last night. They're grown. One of them's married to a police officer in Atlanta, Georgia. Another one is just graduating from college, and another one just graduated from high school. And like they're women. And they sing "You Are My Sunshine" to their father, who's on a unit that can hear the prison show. I like to think of KPFT as the Hernandez family, and in that part, the KPFT is the Hernandez family. We kept them together. The girls have listened to their grandmother and not gotten into any trouble, have not gotten prematurely pregnant, have not gotten all of the things that can happen to girls. They have lives, careers, futures, and they have a father. And he's not going to be able to meet his great-grandchildren or grandchildren until these women are up in years. KPFT is the adhesive in the Hernandez family. KPFT is the adhesive in different communities. When I was general manager, I did everything wrong. I would sit and listen to the radio, and my criteria was, could you put all of the listeners to this show in one room? If you could, that program does not belong in KPFT. It belongs in that room. But if you had a community of people that you outreach that needed those radio waves to connect one another together to listen to this show, and that's why some of the music shows are so powerful. I mean, I listen to Larry. I'm not listening to Larry today because I'm here, but I listen to Larry Winters every Saturday because that is the most political show on KPFT, but he does it with music. Does the whole thing with music. I listen to Voices at Work because I'm a labor goon. It's my community. It's my parents' community. It's who I was raised to be. And it has the ideas. And you know what? When they play music, which is not very often, it's old Union music. Stirs the soul. Reaches in time and grabs you about your social responsibility. KPFT is a political entity, but let me tell you, there's one aspect that I want you to keep in mind. We are a community of people that do not agree on everything. I hear it anti-gay stuff on Connect the Dots. So I go down, I sit down with Minister Robert, and we sit down and we have a long conversation about the history of the station, about why no other station would give him time and why KPFT is grabbing at him with open arms so that he can use the station to reach his audience. And you know, I don't hear much anti-gay stuff on Connect the Dots anymore. Because we're also in the negotiation business. If somebody doesn't understand their point of view, we should feel the responsibility to sit down and explain that point of view. And if there's a black show that has anti-gay and lesbian sentiment in it, what is that saying to black gay men, lesbians, and transgendered people? Are you making them decide which part of themselves they want to be less than equal? How do you do that? I couldn't go on the gay show and ask black, lesbian, and gay and transgendered people to fight for their gay rights and surrender the inequality that is brought on by their race. Or double whammies on the lesbians because you can be discriminated because you're a woman. So it is a matter of understanding that we as a community must share. And that, my friends, is the heart of diversity. We ain't ever gonna all be the same. I come from a labor, hardworking, poor, semi-country background. I'm never gonna be the same as a child who grew up in River Oaks, because our roots are in different places. And roots are important. But sensitivity to roots is equally important. Thank you, Ted, for brawling this together. It's good to see a former council member over here. And I want y'all to work hard at giving directions to the station to broaden, be more inclusive, and be more like the concept of Pacifica that Lou Hill, I'm not related to Lou Hill, but I wished I were, our founder did. But he was so dogged by the people that realized that early radio was so powerful that the forces coming together and his ill health brought about his suicide. So a man has given his life to protect the integrity of the Pacifica ideal, and that too deserves our honor. Thank you.
How do you follow Ray Hill? I'm gonna give it a shot and see what happens here. First to Ray and Ted and Claude and PK, And a DK, it's just a pleasure to be here with all of you today and to see this kind of extended family of KPFT in the same room together. Ted's talked about doing this for a long time, so I'm glad, Ted, that the day is here, so congratulations. My first encounter with Pacifica was actually not here in Houston, Texas. It's the Pacifica station in California, KPFA. My uncle was the faculty advisor to the Black Student Union at Berkeley. And so as a college student here in Houston, when I'd go and visit him out there in Berkeley, he was always on one show or another on KPFA, and so I'd tag along with him. And of course, if you know Berkeley and you know that station, Pacifica station in California, they kind of wrote the book on activism and all those things that we now take for granted. And I learned at that station and hanging out with my uncle the power of public radio, the power of non-commercial radio, that you got to say and do whatever your heart was in your heart to say and to share, and how to become an advocate by using the power of radio. I had a show for a brief time on Coda. Many of you may remember that station called Interchange. I took the Interchange brand with me when I was assigned to East St. Louis, Illinois, as a vicar for urban affairs by the Roman Catholic Church. The shrine of Our Lady of the Snows in Belleville, Illinois. Anybody know where Belleville and East St. Louis is? Belleville, Illinois, and the Shrine of Our Lady of the Snows had a station called WMRY FM. WMRY FM was a jazz station. It was a station that played jazz except for on Sunday afternoon from 3 to 6 p.m. I had a show called Interchange, where I brought the individuals known as, at that time, the colored Negro Black African Americans from East St. Louis, who were not welcome in Belleville, and the European American Caucasian white folk in Belleville were not welcome in East St. Louis, but they would both meet in the middle, and the middle was the radio station that was on a hill between East St. Louis and Belleville. So I could get the blacks to come to the shrine, I could get the whites from Belleville to come to the shrine, and so for 3 hours, every Sunday afternoon, from 3 to 6, or sometimes from 4 to 6, we'd sit and have a dialogue about social, economic, political issues affecting East St. Louis, affecting Belleville, affecting St. Clair County. I got the mayors, I got the politicians, I got everybody to meet halfway. Halfway. Could never get them to do it in their individual cities. Could never even meet in their individual cities, but they would meet halfway at the shrine. Leo Cheers, a name many of you may have known, was the jazz person on that station. Leo Cheers, the man in the red vest, was nationally known as the best jazz DJ in the country. He also had the most extensive collection of jazz albums at that time than anyone in the country. I got informed with Pacifica here and KPFT during the time when Kathy Whitmire was mayor. I was her agenda director. I think I first met Ray Hill during that time. And I'm not quite sure how I ended up on KPFT. But over the years, off and on, for many years, I had a show called Interchange. Interchange meant inner growth, outer change. The premise was that the more we grew internally, the more we should act differently externally. Inner growth, outer change. And the idea that if I gave you information that you were able to turn into education, education into knowledge, knowledge into wisdom, wisdom into action, and do something with it. It was always about action, our common shared history, our common good, our common goals as a people. On Monday nights for many, many years, the 7 o'clock slot that my good friend the Monitor has now, before Queer Voices, always before Queer Voices, always before Queer Voices, because there was a lot of carryover between my guests and their guests. There was a lot of conversation that took place because we always followed each other. It was a wonderful slot. It was a great show for many, many years, and we did a lot of great things We had people on that no one other show in KPFT ever had. I was able to get guests to come because they felt it was safe. I never attacked them, but I always made sure that both sides and both points of views were presented. I love live call-in talk shows, as Ray mentioned, because you can get both sides going. You can get a great dialogue going, but yet you control the magic button. The thing about KPFT, I've always said this: to know it is to love it. To know the station is to love the station. To me, it is always, and still even today, is one of the best kept secrets, unfortunately, in this city. It is the only place, and I've defined it this way for years, third-party neutral mediating facilitating organization. Doesn't have a dog in the hunt, doesn't necessarily have an agenda, even though some we may say we do, but we really don't. We are here to do the dialogue. We're here to do, as Adiki said, to now do the plural law. We're here to have the rich conversation, the rich dialogue, to inform each other about the other. It is always in dialogue and conversation about the other. That's what the station has stood for and stands for. To inform you, whatever you may be, whoever you think you may be as a human being, to inform you about the other human beings and the essence of human beingness that we all have and that we all carry with us. The station and the programming of the station over these years has been the best voice in this city to help others understand the other, who may be different than themselves, but not as different from themselves as they think they may be. But you gotta have the conversation. You have to have the dialogue to recognize that. The nature of our society today seems that KPFT's role is even bigger than ever before. Because of the I and me and the we and us and the splits that we have going on, there is this place called KPFT where both sides can come together and have that richness of that dialogue. KPFT also serves the role of bringing the next generation through to understand the history and the past. If you don't know your history and your past, you know the phrase that follows that. The past informs the present so that we can all have a brighter future together. And what happens, I think, today, in the sadness of what's going on, is that we are losing. Technology has helped in many ways, but it has also hindered. Because the type of dialogue and conversation you have on a talk show, on radio, is different than you have on Facebook and texting and tweeting, etc. It is a much different kind of conversation. I will contend it's a deeper conversation. The give and take, the back and forthness that you have on radio, particularly in a call-in format, is a rich, rich conversation. The other thing I think that's happening right now is that, and I think it was probably Ted's wisdom, I'm going to say he did it by divine inspiration, to have this day that we're doing this Saturday morning between the recent reshowing of Roots, these last 3-4 nights, and the upcoming Juneteenth celebration, to have this kind of anchor between those two events should cause us to pause for a moment and to realize the historical richness of what we're doing here at KPFT. The thing that I think has to be said about KPFT, since I'm supposedly on the past panel of the old people.
Speak for yourself. Speak for yourself.
But PK said she thought for a moment, just for a moment, of growing a beard just for the day, since she was among the bearded ones this morning. The important thing I think, though, for KPFT going forward is to really understand the role that it can play in Steve Kleinberg's Houston. At reference point, Steve Kleinberg's Houston, the sociologist at Rice, our good friend, as I always say, the white boy who gives us cover about data, statistics, and demographics. Don't blame me, I'm just a messenger. This is what the white boy at Rice says. And he knows I said it. He knows I said it that way, so it's not out of disrespect, it's out of great respect for his work, because it does give us cover. If we're going to have a future in Houston, in Steve Kleinberg's Houston, we need KPFT to be able to be that voice, not only for the voiceless, not only for those traditionally and historically that it has served, but for the new generation of this demographic change, to have a place where we all can sit together and learn about each other and learn from each other. There is no other station that can play that role. None in this city. And I think what's going to happen for the station to do that, we got to quit the internal bickering. We have to quit the internal stuff that happens around that station. The external need and the message is much broader and much more important than any internal discussion and battle. It is not about us internally, it's about we and us externally. It is not about the I and me-isms internally, it's about the external role we play in the community. So we got to figure out how to get past a lot of this stuff. I call it nonsense, quite frankly, because it's all about adult wishes and not about the greater community. I'll end on this note. I'm a big proponent of servant leadership. I've just written a book on servant leadership called A Heart of Use and Lessons in Servant Leadership. I've been blessed to do a television show now on ACC TV called Dialogue Houston that's in its 21st year this year. I know the power of dialogue and conversation. I know the power of getting people together in a room who never would have been in the room together to get to know, discuss, and have a dialogue, and have a conversation, and get to understand each other. I think we are wonderfully poised, again, with the stations going forward, to play an important role in this city. But it's not going to happen unless we get that internal balance right and internal understanding of who we are. I'll end this way because I think it's an important concept to put out there. It is always about being in alignment. An alignment for us as individuals, as programmers, as the board, as the station manager, as the volunteers. All of us who work with this station over the years have given our time, and that's important, who all have given their time as volunteers. Not one person has been paid as a programmer or a volunteer to do what they do on that station. You know, we give up our time and our lives to do that. But that internal balance, that alignment that has to happen of the head, the heart, and the gut, to think, to feel, to act, the fancy way, the cognitive, the affective, the behavioral parts of our being, the past, the present, the future, yesterday, today, and tomorrow, the message, the mission, the motivation, the traditional, the transitional, the transformational. I can go like that for a half hour because that's all it is. What do I think as a human being? What do I feel about what I say, I think, and believe as a human being? And what action behaviors am I called to perform? For whom? For whom? For the common good, for all. Not about I and me, about we and us. We're put on the face of the earth for one reason and one reason only, to serve our fellow human being. And how we do that and how we address the issues of our day, socially, economically, political, and others, depends on how you see yourself being in alignment and how we can teach others the importance of alignment and the work that they do on behalf of others. KPFT has always played that role. It will continue to play that role, but will only do so if human beings step up to the task and understand their role and the rightful way to address in a respectful way other human beings who may be different than themselves, but yet as they talk to them in dialogue, find out they're not as different as they think they are. Because it's not about I and me or we and us. It's not about gay, straight, or lesbian. It's not about black, green, pink, orange, or yellow. It's about human beings. As I've gotten older, I do not deal, nor do I know what an individual or a person is. I only know what human beings are. Because when I lift and elevate the individual and the person to the human beingness, it is impossible to treat a human being the same way you would treat an individual or a person. It has always been about human beings. If you watch Roots again for the last 4 nights, it is always about elevating the person to the level of human beings. Human beings, the essence of human beingness is something that's really important. It is where Roots started and Roots ended in both the 1997 version and the one we just saw for the last 4 nights. That most powerful scene of anything ever broadcast on a television set in this country. Behold, the only thing greater than yourself. Human beings, human beings, human beings.